Hey everybody, it is Nathan Selove with another edition of Autism Actually Speaking. So one of the things that I think is really important for us to talk about during Autism Acceptance Month is problems within our own community. Namely, some of the problematic ways in which autistics sometimes interact with each other. So to that end, I want to spend today's video talking about gatekeeping in the autism community. First off, what is gatekeeping? Gatekeeping happens when people within a specific community are exclusionary or disregarding of others within that community because their experiences might fall out of their own experiences. For example, this often happens within the gaming community. A person might say that they're a gamer, and another gamer might be like, "Oh, well, you're a gamer? Okay, then tell me every single level in Half-Life in alphabetical order." Oh, you can't do that? Oh, well, you're not a real gamer. There are lots of video games out there that people might play. And just because someone might play different video games than you or might have different video game knowledge of you doesn't mean that they don't like video games and therefore consider themselves a gamer. Now, unfortunately, this idea often happens within marginalized communities as well. So let's talk specifically about how it can impact the autism community. Now, as you may know, there are many different traits that are often associated with a person having autism. Problems with eye contact, having trouble interacting with others, barriers to romantic relationships, struggles with employment, struggles making friends, struggles just communicating in general. Now, these are all common struggles that are associated with a person being on the autism spectrum. And a person who has gone through those struggles might reasonably see somebody who identifies as autistic who hasn't been through all of those struggles as being trying to infringe on their territory, trying to be a part of the community without actually sharing all of the experiences with that community. And sometimes that can lead autistics to be really upset and say things like, "Oh, well, you have a romantic relationship, so are you really autistic?" Or, "Oh, you seem to have a job, you seem to be good at interacting with others, you're not sharing my experience." But here's the issue with that. And I'll say it again, the way I've said it 1,000 times. You met one autistic, you met one autistic. Different autistics struggle with different things. You might have one autistic that's perfectly comfortable with eye contact but can't stand the feeling of cotton against their skin, and then you might have another autistic that is fine with cotton against their skin and is able to wear cotton shirts, but is really bad at looking people in the eyes. Both might still be autistic, and neither should be exclusionary towards each other. Autistics can have jobs. Autistics can have romances. Autistics can have friends. Autistics can be outgoing. Autistics can be extroverted. Autistics can be a freaking professor of communication studies. It doesn't mean they should be excluded from a community that should foster inclusion. A lot of autistics, myself included, already feel outcasted enough by the rest of society. And when an autistic comes seeking community and shares their experience, and that experience doesn't follow every single aspect that's associated with autism, which, by the way, is impossible because sometimes there are contradictory aspects that are associated with autism, it can be devastating. And ultimately, it hurts the neurodiversity movement. It's leaving one set of standards that is being imposed upon us by neurotypicals to another set of standards that is being imposed on us by gatekeeping autistics. I understand that some autistics struggle more than others. And it is okay to acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean they should be excluded from our community. That's how you get autistics that are terrified of seeking community, terrified of seeking a potential diagnosis, terrified of seeking accommodation for things that they really do need help with. And another important point I want to make on that front is we also really shouldn't be doing a lot of gatekeeping on people that are self-diagnosed. I know I've talked about this particular thing before, but many people might not be able to get a diagnosis because of where they live, their financial situation, or the resources that are available to them at that time. I'm not saying that we should be encouraging self-diagnosis at the drop of a hat, but it can still be legitimate. And we should be careful about gatekeeping even on that front. I have known actual people that were afraid to get a diagnosis or refused to refer to themselves as autistic to anybody but their closest friends, specifically because of the gatekeeping that sometimes happens within the autism community. Because they felt as if because some of their struggles were not on par with others in the autism community, that those struggles were not legitimate. But that's a really bad way of looking at it. I mean, if only the most autistic person in the world were allowed to identify as autistic, then there'd only be one autistic. Also, Defining that would be impossible anyway, because autism is a spectrum, and it's not a spectrum of side to side of most autistic to least autistic. It's a spectrum that's all over the place with a bunch of weird, funky contradictions. Autism is the type of thing that can cause one person to hate taking showers because they can't stand the feeling of getting wet, and another person to take a shower every freaking day because they can't stand the feeling of oils on their skin. There's already enough ways in which autistics struggle against the world. A world that wasn't built for us. And we don't need to add to that within our own community. We don't need to be turning against each other and trying to define who's autistic enough to be considered autistic. This is an inclusive community. That's what it needs to be, and that's what it should be. So if we really want to achieve acceptance from the world, we have to accept each other as well. Well, that's today's video. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this episode, please give it a like, a share, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Check out some of my other stuff. And if you want to support the channel in other ways, support me on Patreon. And I'm also on Twitter, @NathanSelove, so you should follow me. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or topics you'd like addressed, please leave them in the comments below, or message me on my Facebook, also linked below. And remember, if you think you're autistic, you might be autistic.